If you're over 65 and your blood pressure has been harder to manage lately, even though you're taking your medication, watching your salt, and doing everything your doctor told you to do, I want you to know something important. You are not doing anything wrong, and you are not imagining it. Blood pressure genuinely does become more difficult to control as we get older. But here's what almost nobody explains, including most doctors during a standard 15-minute appointment, is why that happens, and more importantly, what you can actually do about it, because the reason isn't what most people assume. It's not simply that your body is worn out. It's not just genetics catching up with you. And it's definitely not that medication has stopped working or that nothing can help anymore. The real reason goes much deeper than any of that. It involves changes happening quietly inside your blood vessels, changes that begin decades before you ever see a high number on that little home monitor sitting on your nightstand. Changes that your salt intake and your medication were never fully designed to address on their own. And once you understand what's actually happening, once you see the full picture, the steps that genuinely help start to make a lot more sense. This isn't going to be a lecture. There's no complicated medical terminology here. Just a clear, honest conversation about what's happening in your body after 65 and what real people very much like you, have found genuinely useful. So stay with me, because what we're about to cover is the part of the blood pressure conversation that most people never get to hear. Now, we get to the part that actually changes things, because everything we've covered so far, the arterial stiffness, the nervous system changes, the blood pressure variability, all of it responds to the right daily habits. Not perfectly, not overnight, but meaningfully, measurably, and in ways that compound over time. Let's start with the one that surprises people most. Breathing. Not in a vague, wellness trend kind of way. In a specific, physiologically grounded way that directly influences your autonomic nervous system, the exact system we talked about that loses precision with age and drives so much of the variability in your blood pressure readings. Here's the connection. Your autonomic nervous system has two modes. One is the stress response, sometimes called fight or flight. Heart rate up, blood vessels tightened, blood pressure elevated, your body on high alert. The other mode is the rest and recover response, sometimes called rest and digest. Heart rate slowed, blood vessels relaxed, blood pressure eased downward. Most older adults with blood pressure challenges spend more time than they realize tipped toward that first mode, not because of dramatic stress necessarily, but because of the low-level, background tension that accumulates from years of living, health worries, family concerns, financial pressures, the general weight of a full life. And here is what most people never get told. Slow, deliberate breathing is one of the fastest and most direct ways to shift your nervous system from that stressed, elevated state into the calmer, more relaxed one. It works through a nerve called the vagus nerve, the main communication highway between your brain and your body's internal organs, which responds directly to the rhythm of your breathing. When you breathe slowly and deeply, you activate the vagus nerve. It signals your heart to slow slightly. It tells your blood vessels to ease their tension. Blood pressure responds within minutes. The practice itself couldn't be simpler. Breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4. Hold gently for just a moment. Then breathe out slowly through your mouth for a count of 6 or 8, longer than the inhale. That extended exhale is the key. It's what activates the calming branch of your nervous system most effectively. 5 minutes of this, twice a day. That's it. Research has shown that consistent slow breathing practice, done regularly over weeks, produces measurable reductions in blood pressure, not as a replacement for medication, but as a genuine, physiologically meaningful addition to everything else you're doing. And you can do it anywhere. Sitting in your favorite chair in the morning before the day begins. Resting in the car before you go into a doctor's appointment. Lying in bed at night when sleep is slow to come. No equipment, no cost, no side effects. Now let's talk about movement, but not in the way you might expect. Most blood pressure conversations jump straight to aerobic exercise, walking, swimming, cycling, and those things genuinely do help. Regular moderate aerobic activity remains one of the most well-supported lifestyle interventions for blood pressure that exists, but there's a specific type of movement that research has recently identified as particularly effective for the arterial stiffness we discussed earlier, and most people have never heard of it. It's called resistance exercise, strength training, and before you picture a gym full of heavy weights and young athletes, this isn't that. For older adults, Resistance exercise can mean something as simple as sitting in a chair and pressing your palms together firmly for a count of 10, or using a light resistance band while watching the evening news, or doing wall push-ups in your kitchen while the coffee brews, or slowly rising from a seated position 10 times in a row, which works your leg muscles significantly more than it might seem. Studies have found that regular resistance exercise, even light, low-intensity versions done consistently, can improve the elasticity of arterial walls over time. It stimulates the cells lining your blood vessels to produce compounds that support flexibility and healthy blood flow. It directly addresses one of the root mechanisms driving blood pressure higher after 65, 2 or 3 times a week. Nothing heroic, just consistent, combined with regular gentle walking, which supports overall circulation, helps manage weight, reduces stress hormones, and improves sleep quality all at once. These two forms of movement work together in ways that no single medication fully replicates. And speaking of sleep, let's give this one the honest attention it deserves. Poor sleep and high blood pressure have a relationship that runs in both directions. High blood pressure can disrupt sleep, and poor sleep reliably raises blood pressure. For many older adults, this cycle quietly perpetuates itself for years without anyone connecting the dots. Here's the specific mechanism worth understanding. During deep, restful sleep, your blood pressure naturally dips, sometimes by 10 to 20% below your daytime readings. Researchers call this nocturnal dipping. It's a normal, healthy, restorative process, and it matters enormously for long-term cardiovascular health. When sleep is fragmented, when you're waking frequently, tossing and turning, or not reaching the deeper stages of rest, that nightly dip doesn't happen reliably. Your blood vessels miss their nightly recovery window. Stress hormones that should fall overnight stay elevated instead, and you wake up the next morning with a cardiovascular system that never quite got the rest it needed. Over time, consistently poor sleep has been linked to higher average blood pressure, greater blood pressure variability, and increased strain on the heart wall. Of the things we've been discussing in a different context, few practical habits make a meaningful difference. Here, going to bed and waking at consistent times, even on weekends, helps anchor your body's internal clock so that sleep comes more reliably and runs more deeply. Keeping your bedroom cool and as dark as possible supports the hormonal conditions your body needs for restorative sleep. Avoiding alcohol within 3 hours of bedtime is worth mentioning specifically because while alcohol can make falling asleep feel easier, it significantly disrupts the deeper stages of sleep and tends to cause middle of the night waking that many older adults attribute to other causes. And here's one that often surprises people: checking your blood pressure right before bed if your numbers have been concerning you, and then lying there worrying about what you saw is a habit worth reconsidering. Anxiety about your reading activates your stress response at exactly the moment your body needs to be winding down. For many people, moving their evening blood pressure check to earlier in the day makes a genuine difference in how well they sleep. Now let's talk about something on your plate. Specifically, something that most people know a little about, but not quite enough. Most people have heard that sodium raises blood pressure. Reduce the salt. That advice isn't wrong, but it's incomplete in a way that leaves a significant opportunity on the table, because the other side of the sodium story is potassium. And this is where so many people are quietly missing out. Potassium and sodium work in balance inside your body. Potassium helps your kidneys flush excess sodium out, which directly reduces the amount of fluid your blood vessels have to manage, easing pressure from the inside. Potassium also has a direct relaxing effect on blood vessel walls themselves. The problem is that most Americans, particularly older adults, consume far too much sodium and far too little potassium. The ratio between the two matters as much as either one in isolation. And simply reducing sodium while ignoring potassium leaves the equation only half corrected. Foods rich in potassium are not exotic or expensive. Bananas get all the attention, but sweet potatoes are actually higher in potassium and deeply satisfying on a cool evening. White beans, spinach, avocado, plain yogurt. Even a baked potato, eaten with the skin on, is an excellent source. Adding 1 or 2 genuinely potassium-rich foods to your daily eating, not as a temporary fix but as a consistent habit, supports blood pressure regulation through a mechanism that sodium reduction alone simply cannot address. And finally, let's talk about something that involves no food, no exercise, And no breathing technique. Social connection. This one tends to raise a few eyebrows, but the research behind it is surprisingly strong. Chronic loneliness and social isolation activate the same stress response pathways that physical threats do. The autonomic nervous system responds to the absence of meaningful human connection as a form of danger. Cortisol levels rise. Inflammation increases. Blood vessels stay in a more constricted state than they should. For older adults, particularly those who are retired, widowed, or living alone, this is not a small consideration. Studies have found that socially isolated older adults have measurably higher blood pressure than their more connected peers, and increasing meaningful social contact, whether through a weekly church gathering, a regular phone call with someone they love, a community center class, or simply a neighbor who stops by for coffee, produces effects on stress hormones and blood pressure that no pill fully replicates. Your relationships are part of your cardiovascular health. That's not a sentiment. That's physiology. And it's one more reminder that blood pressure after 65 is not a single problem with a single solution. It's a whole life picture, one that includes your arteries, your nervous system, your sleep, your plate, your movement, your breath, and the people who matter to you. The final piece of this conversation ties all of that together, and it includes the most important practical step you can take starting this week, one that most people overlook entirely, because at this point you have something genuinely valuable that most people never get from a single conversation about blood pressure. You understand why it becomes harder to manage after 65, not just that it does, but the actual mechanisms behind it. The arterial stiffness, the autonomic nervous system changes, the variability, the interplay between sleep and stress and movement and the food on your plate and the people in your life. That understanding changes everything, because when you know why something is happening, the steps that address it stop feeling like arbitrary rules you're supposed to follow. They start feeling like logical responses to something you actually understand. And that shift from following instructions to genuinely understanding is what turns short-term effort into lasting change. So let's talk about what to actually do with everything you've learned today. The first and most important practical step is one that surprises almost everyone when they hear it. Start tracking your blood pressure at home, but track it differently than you probably have been. Most people check their blood pressure once, look at the number, feel either relieved or worried, and move on. But a single reading tells you very little about what your blood pressure is actually doing across the full span of your day. Given everything we now understand about variability, about how readings shift with meals, stress, movement, and nervous system fluctuations, the single daily reading is like trying to understand the weather by looking outside once at noon. What tells a much richer story is a simple pattern called the 3-reading method. Take your blood pressure 3 times in a row, with 1 full minute of quiet rest between each reading. Record all 3 numbers, then average them. Do this at the same time each day. Morning works well for most people, before coffee and before any medication if your doctor recommends morning dosing. That average is far more meaningful than any single reading. It smooths out the momentary spikes caused by rushing to the monitor, thinking about something stressful, or simply sitting down too quickly. It gives you and your doctor a much more accurate picture of your true baseline. Then, and this part matters just as much, bring those recorded numbers to your next appointment. Not just a verbal summary, actual written records with dates and times. Doctors make better decisions with better information. And the pattern in your numbers over 2 or 3 weeks tells a story that a single in-office reading simply cannot. If your readings vary dramatically from morning to evening, if you see swings of 20, 30, or more points between your highest and lowest readings on the same day, that variability itself is worth discussing specifically. Not just the high number, the range, because as we talked about, it's the swings that place the most cumulative stress on your blood vessels and your brain. Now let's talk about something that many older adults feel but rarely say out loud to their doctor, the feeling that blood pressure management has become overwhelming. Multiple medications, conflicting advice from different sources, numbers that don't cooperate despite genuine effort, the sense that you're doing everything right and still not seeing the results you were told to expect. If that resonates with you, please know that this feeling is both valid and extremely common, and it points to something real. Managing blood pressure after 65 genuinely is more complex than managing it at 45. The physiology is different. The contributing factors are more numerous, And the one-size approach that worked for years may simply need to evolve. That's not defeat. That's just where you are in your health journey. And it's a completely workable place to be with the right conversation. Which brings us to the most underused tool available to any older adult managing blood pressure: a frank, specific, unhurried conversation with your doctor. Not about getting a prescription adjusted, about understanding your complete picture. Ask specifically about arterial stiffness and whether it might be contributing to your readings. Ask about blood pressure variability and whether the swings in your numbers concern your doctor as much as the high readings do. Ask whether any of your current medications might be contributing to dizziness when you stand, and whether that's something worth addressing. If you've never had that specific conversation, if your appointments have mostly involved checking a number, reviewing a prescription, and moving on, you are not alone. And you deserve more than that. You are entitled to understand what is happening in your own body. Good doctors welcome these questions, and if you feel rushed or dismissed, it is entirely reasonable to ask for a longer appointment specifically to discuss blood pressure management in depth. Many practices offer this. Most people simply never ask. Now, beyond the doctor's office, let's talk about the daily rhythm that pulls everything we've discussed into one manageable routine. Because the mistake most people make is trying to implement everything at once, feeling overwhelmed within a week, and quietly abandoning most of it. Don't do that. Instead, choose one thing from everything you've heard today. Just one. The thing that felt most relevant to your life. The thing that made you think, that might actually be part of what's going on with me. Maybe it's the slow breathing practice. 5 minutes in the morning before the day begins. That's your one thing for the first 2 weeks. Nothing else added until it feels natural. Maybe it's the 10-minute walk after dinner. Out the front door and down the block and back. Simple. Consistent. Every evening. Maybe it's adding one potassium-rich food to your daily eating. A sweet potato a few times a week, a handful of spinach in your eggs in the morning, a spoonful of white beans alongside whatever you're already having for lunch. Maybe it's going to bed 30 minutes earlier and turning off the television that's been running in the bedroom for years. One thing, done consistently, for 2 weeks. Then add a second. This is how lasting change actually happens in the human body, not through dramatic overhaul, through patient, steady accumulation. Small deposits made every day into an account whose balance you may not see immediately, but that grows quietly and reliably in the background of your ordinary life. Your arteries respond to this. Slowly, but genuinely. The cells lining your blood vessels are sensitive to the environment you create for them, through movement, through sleep, through the food you eat, through how often your nervous system gets to rest and recover. Give them consistent support and they respond over weeks and months in ways that show up in your readings, in your energy, and in how you feel getting through your day. One more thing worth saying clearly before we finish. Age is not the final word on any of this. Yes, arterial stiffness is a real and natural part of getting older. Yes, the autonomic nervous system becomes less precise over time. Yes, blood pressure management genuinely does require more attention and more nuance after 65 than it did before. But the human body, your body, retains a remarkable capacity to respond to care at every age. People in their 70s and 80s who make consistent lifestyle changes see measurable improvements in blood vessel function, blood pressure stability, sleep quality, and overall cardiovascular health. The research on this is clear and it is encouraging. You are not too old to improve. You are not too far along to benefit. And you are not alone in navigating something that is genuinely complex and genuinely worth the effort. The fact that you watched this video, that you stayed through all of it, tells me that you care about your health in a way that a lot of people don't, that you're willing to learn, to understand, and to do something with what you know. That matters more than any single blood pressure reading ever could. Take care of your arteries, rest your nervous system, move your body gently and consistently, sleep like your health depends on it, because it does. Eat in a way that gives your blood vessels what they need to stay as flexible and responsive as possible. Stay connected to the people who matter to you. And keep asking questions of your doctor, of yourself, of every resource that helps you understand your own body more clearly. You have more influence over this than you've probably been told, and that influence, applied consistently, patiently, and with genuine understanding, is one of the most powerful health tools available to you, starting today.